Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, this afternoon, guess what we're tasting? Yeah, okay. Pretty obvious by now. This is obviously part 3 of the Compass Box Trilogy. So it's the last 3 samples that Compass Box kindly sent me or gave to me, as the case may be. So it's kind of just sort of wrapping up, I suppose, the range. And I think you can probably figure out what 3 bottles we're tasting this afternoon. Well, I mean, the giveaway's obviously the front screen, the logo-y picture that I do. So I guess there's not much real point in sort of waffling away too much. I mean, I've said pretty much what I need to say about Compass Box. So I'll just introduce the last 3 then. Right, okay, so this afternoon we are looking at, firstly we're going to look at Hedonism, which is the vatted grain whisky that Compass Box do, bottled at 43%. Now, I believe, if my memory is correct, that it was first released around about 2003, and it was released at a time when there wasn't really a great deal of grain whisky on the market, and so it was quite novel, quite unique. I mean, it's still relatively unique. There's not a lot of vatted grain whiskies out and about, if any at all, in actual fact. So, but nowadays, obviously, you can get hold of single grain whiskies a lot easier than you could back then. So it's questionable as to sort of like how it stacks up with in light of the fact that there are a number of grain whiskies available. Now, I looked back at my tasting notes at some of the releases of Hedonism that they've done over years, and the grain component does tend to change. And so, as far as I'm aware, they select grain from sort of a couple of, well, 4, possibly 4 distilleries that could be that. They use Cameron Bridge, Cambus, Port Dundas, or Dumbarton. Now, I must admit I've not tasted a bottling to my knowledge that had any Dumbarton in, but Cameron Bridge they seem to use quite a fair amount, and so it does have a tendency to obviously change a little bit. I mean, as we've seen when I did an episode of the show on grain whisky, I don't think I did one with different grains, so it might be an interesting one to do, just to sort of see the differences between the different grains, if there is any. But anyway, that's for another episode of the show. Anyway, so it's aged in either first fill American oak barrels or rejuvenated American oak hoggies. So, and I do remember it being there's quite a lot of oak. Certainly, I mean, some of the single grains, like Invergordon, for example, tend to come across with a big oak character. And I certainly remember the Hedonism being sort of fairly heavily oaky. So we'll see what this bottling has in store for us then. And finally, these 2, Peat Monster. Well, this is the first one, Peat Monster, bottled at 46%. Now, I've probably been a little bit unfair to it over the years. Now, anything you call monster, you initially think of big, intense. And certainly if you call it Peat Monster, then you're thinking of Big Peat. Well, not necessarily Big Peat, because that's Douglas Lang's bottling, but a huge peat presence. Now, and I guess when it was released, the concept of what heavily peated malt was kind of different to what it is today. I mean, certainly you have bottlings like Octomore, for example, which have certainly sort of skewed the whole idea of what heavy peat actually means. I mean, prior to Octomore, you would say that sort of 45-50 parts per million is fairly heavily peated. With Octomore being 170, 180 parts per million, it's you can't say it's quite so heavily peated, but so it's always had an issue because it's never been particularly heavily peated. I mean, it's a vatting of Lefroy, Colila, Lecce and Ardmore. So none of them are, well, I mean, Lefroy peated to about 35-40 parts per million. The others not quite so heavily peated. So it's never been a peat monster. Now, and I did say this, and I've said this on a number of occasions, and I did actually have this conversation with Chris and from Compass Box, and the whole, they never intended it to be a roaring peat monster. It was the terminology monster referred to more of the fact that it was created a bit like, as he said, Frankenstein's monster was made up from parts, which is what they were trying to get across. But of course, you know, like I said, when you see the term monster, you automatically think of something big and something OTT rather than something sort of put together and created. So anyway, aside from the quibble on the name, I've never been the world's biggest fan of it. It has to be said. But you know, we will see what this particular bottling gives us then. And the last one is the one and only limited edition they kindly let me have, which is the Peat Monster 10th Anniversary Edition, bottled at 48.9. Now, thank God this particular one doesn't actually have any leche in it. It is vatting of Lefroy Corlila, and I think possibly Brora. Certainly the information I could find on it was a bit vague, but it did seem to sort of say a peated malt from the area of Carnelish. And the only one I think of is Brora, and Brora has long since gone and bloody expensive stuff nowadays. So if it has got some Brora in, it's probably only a teaspoonful. But anyway, so that's what I think is in that particular bottling. So it'll be interesting to taste. As you can guess, it was released for the 10th anniversary of the release of Peat Monster, and I think it was released in 2013. So I'd guess that it was about 2003, isn't it? So, God, maths. Anyway. That's enough of that. Shall we crack on and taste the hedonism then? Right, okay, so hedonism. Let's see what the nose gives us. It's a nice nose. It's a good whiskey. A lot of chunky, toffeed, fat oak. A little bit of almost like a fat corn note, a sort of slightly corny kind of note. I mean, I'm guessing that's probably more from the American oak than the fact that there's only corn in it. Bit of crispness, bit of that sort of, you know, classic grain spiciness. It's got a little bit of floral note to it. But it's a big chunky monster. It has to be said. It's very. And so that oak is a little bit of caramel. It gives it a very rounded, soft, quite floral feeling to it. I mean, it's a nice nose. It's really very appealing. I mean, there is a lot of oak. A little bit of dried fruit. It seems to me younger somehow. I mean. Again, looking back at my tasting notes, I think originally it was blended from grain whiskies of between about 12 and 23 years old. And I think Chris basically said that the current bottling is about 19 years old, approximately. So theoretically, it shouldn't have really changed, but it does seem younger. A little bit of beeswax now, a little bit of sort of light honey, but yeah, I'm getting a lot of waxy notes now. Dried fruit. Subtle it is not. Kind of hits you all in one go. You get sort of like creamy oak, toffee, dried fruit, spicy grain notes, and it's all like, you know, kind of at you all in one go. Nice fade though, and it just carries on. It's sort of a continuity really of that sort of big hit. Again, very soft, a lot of oak, so a lot of vanilla and toffee, and a little bit of caramel. And it does kind of like, that is the emphasis of the hedonism again on the oak. I mean, that's not surprising considering it's Compass Box, and yeah, I think it still stacks up really well. It's got some nice sugary moments. It's got nice length, and it's maybe a little bit in the sweeter zone, and a little bit less of the sort of like, you know, the grainy. The grainy spirit notes, but I still think that's a really nice bottling, and you know, I'd still quite happily sell that and obviously stock it. So you know, yeah, that's not a bad one at all. Okay, on to Peat Monster. Let's see what the nose gives us then, shall we? Well, yes, it's young, it's peaty. There's certainly some medicinal light iodine Lafroig notes. There's also a bit of carboardy leche notes. It's got that sort of off the still kind of character, not hugely. I mean, so it kind of says to me that a large chunk of this is probably less than 8 years old. I mean, it's got a nice freshness. I mean, I've tasted this a number of times, and it has been quite a variable bottling, it has to be said. Probably the most variable bottling that I've tasted in the Compass Box line. And it has gone from being, yeah, not too shabby like this one, to being, you know, almost sort of diet peat, as the terminology was used when we were tasting it at the World Whisky Awards. Not that we knew what it was, but it's got some nice smokiness. It's just got, it's that bloody leche note. It's that carboardy. Oh, I don't like it. I don't like, you know. No, that's not strictly. I'm not a fan of leche, as you well know. Although indeed I've come across the occasional good bottling of leche. So much of it does have that carboardiness, and it does to a certain degree mar the nose on this. I mean, it's got a nice kind of crispness, a sort of like a vibrancy, which I guess is probably coming from the Ardmore. That's, you know, that almost granity highlandy sort of note to it. A little bit of violet. Palate. Very sweet. A lot of oak. Didn't get a lot of oak so much on the nose, but the palate is certainly a lot of oak. Possibly a little bit too much, if I'm being completely honest. Again, it's got a little bit of medicinal peat, a little bit of smokiness, some nice sweet fruit, and again a little bit of that leche cardboardiness. But I think it's just a little bit too heavy on the oak on the palate. I'd like to have seen less. It's sort of blanketing, and I guess oak and peat is quite difficult, because, well, like anything, if the oak can be the sort of the dominating factor, and yeah, it gives it a smoothness, it gives it a softness. It takes off the sort of edges of the young Islers, and I can see this appealing to a lot of people. For me, I'm not quite so hot on it. It has to be said, but you know, this is probably one of the better bottlings of Peat Monster that I've tasted, and so I can see why people would like it, because it kind of like doesn't quite have the astringency of some of the Islers. Certainly that's what the oak is doing. It's taking off the edges, removing a little bit of that astringent character, although there's a nice salty finish. I will give it that. So yeah, it's not bad. It is what it is, and I can see I can see people quite liking that. So yeah, not too bad. Right, and finally the 10th anniversary Peat Monster. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end. Well, obviously, from the word goes, a lot more maturity. Some dusty oak, soft, dusty spices, dusty peat, very mellow. It's got a roundness again. It's almost kind of like, I mean, if I was tasting this blind, yeah, I might be in kind of like Bamor territory. It's got that fullness, richness, which is possibly coming from the brewer, if there is any brewer in this. But I mean, certainly the Freud is not renowned for that kind of richness. Neither is Kalila. Certainly they tend to be, although Kalila can be or is relatively oily-ish these days. And Lefroy can be a bit sweet, but it's certainly not this full. Bit of beeswax again, bit of pepper, mellow, dusty peat. That's a beautiful nose. That's a beautiful, aged, mature Islay. Again, not a monster. You never, when you're talking about old Islay malts, you're never going to get huge peating quantities, even if they've been fairly heavily peated to start off with. A little bit of citrus, little violet note, but again, it's just got that overwhelming, dusty, mature nose to it. I mean, this is that's just absolutely gorgeous. That is spot on. Stunning, absolutely stunning. Palate. Oh, that's good. Big, malty mouthful. Dried fruits, a little bit of soft, mature peat smoke, a little bit of violets, a little bit of sort of Bamori Parma violets on the finish, right on the edge of the tongue. A lot of sooty notes, but it's robust, it's malty, it's dark. There's a little bit of treacle, a little bit of dried fruit, sort of not satsuma, sultana. Again, it's kind of, Bamori, sort of Bunnahabani at its kind of fattest. So that's intriguing. That's really interesting. Like again, the sort of Lefroy is adding that little bit of medicinal note, and I'm guessing that slight fresher element is probably coming from the Kalila, although it could equally be coming from the brewer. But either way. Chewy, big mouthful, very, very good. Really like that. That's seriously impressive. Right. Okay. So let's sum this little tasting up. So before I do so, just yet again a big thank you to Compass Box for all the samples of the range. I mean, I'm guessing that. The powers that be have liked the other episodes of the show because they've retweeted my tweets. So I guess they're quite happy with what I've said. I think by and large, I think the whole Compass Box range is pretty damn good. The Hedonism, I still like it. I mean, given the fact that maybe it's not quite so unique, like I was saying, that there are a lot more grain whiskies available, so it doesn't really quite have that uniqueness as a selling point anymore, but I think the quality is still pretty good. Can't argue with that. It's relatively expensive. I forget what it is retailing for now, but it's certainly not a cheap bottling, but I still think it's worth having a look at. Peat Monster, well, I think I will give it this due. This particular bottling is probably one of the better bottlings that I've tasted of it. It's never going to be. I don't know. It's. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can see the appeal of it. Okay, like I said, it's got a lot of oak. It kind of takes off the edges. It's probably a good one if you're looking at sort of getting into peated whiskies. It's probably not a bad one to sort of start off with, is personally, I think ditch the leche. I don't think that's doing the nose or the palate any favours whatsoever. Stick in another peated malt or just sort of get shot of it altogether. I don't really see what you're gaining from it. I know there are people that love leche, and for the life of me, I don't know why, because it is just cardboardy, cardboardy and fusty. Its best may be it's drinkable, but those kind of bottlings are just so few and far between. But anyway, that's a rant for another day. But I think certainly Peat Monster has its place. 10th anniversary bottling of Peat Monster, I think, was absolutely fantastic. Really outstanding stuff. Lovely maturity. I mean, I love my old Islers, and I would guess that there's probably some fairly oldish stuff in there, 20s maybe. Certainly nothing younger than I would have thought, about 15. And absolutely fantastic stuff. So there you have it. That's the Compass Box range all wrapped up. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the show and the preceding couple. Hopefully Compass Box will retweet the tweet for this one, even though I've probably not said too many nice things about the Peat Monster. Well, it's kind of me, isn't it? You know what to expect. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. So all I have to say is good dramming and good afternoon.